I talked a lot about overreacting the last couple of days to things you see early in the college football season, or like overreacting to week 0 or week 1 wins or losses. And honestly, with the overreacting, you see it every week throughout college football, really. But speaking of overreacting, it got me thinking, shoot, we're 1 week into the college football season. Let's go ahead and figure out which one of these deadbeat coaches are going to get fired this year. Not really, not exactly that what I want to talk about. I have a list here that I've been sort of keeping over the course of the offseason. And this list is head coaches who I have heard from fans of the team or other fans that they think are on the hot seat or could potentially be on the hot seat for the 2024 season. So we're a weekend, everybody's played at least one game. It's now that I'm looking down at this list, there are some of these I think maybe y'all might have been right about. Some of them maybe not so much. So this list is in no particular order because I've kind of just wrote this list down as I've heard from fans over the course of the offseason. And we're going to kind of track this list during the course of the season. I don't think I'll be doing a video like this every week. But maybe once a month, we'll just go back and we'll track, where are these coaches that, according to you, the viewers, were on the hot seat entering the 2024 season or could potentially be on the hot seat by the end of the 2024 season. The first name on my list is Dabo Swinney. I don't really feel any differently about Dabo than I did over the offseason when people would bring this up to me. I don't think Dabo is in any danger at all of getting fired from Clemson. Not now, not the middle of this season, not the end of this season, not any time before next season, probably no time in the next few years. It's hard to see any further than that down the road. And I know he's got 2 national titles, but let's not pretend that the shine from that just doesn't last forever anymore. So Could a time come where Clemson eventually fired him? Maybe. I don't think the 2 national titles would just completely save him from ever being fired no matter what. I don't think he's going to get fired, though, for winning 8-9 plus games a year for the foreseeable future, which appears to be sort of on the track that he's on. Obviously, week 1 did not go well for Clemson and Dabo, but they played one of the best teams in the country, Georgia. And when you look at their schedule and sort of what has gone on in the ACC so far early in this season, it's possible Clemson wins a lot of games this year. They're not winning a national title. I think that's pretty obvious when you watch week 1. They don't really have the players, the talent at key positions, things like that. I really think the only real position group on Clemson that is national title caliber would be their front 7. And especially their front 4, but their front 7 is good enough to win it all. But, their secondary, their wide receivers, even the running back room beyond Maffa, and obviously Cade Klubnik he's just not an elite level quarterback. But who knows? They can still win a lot of games this year. Miami looks to be the class of the ACC. Louisville looked good against a nobody. Florida State has disappeared. How good is Georgia Tech? Really? What does NC State look like this weekend against the top 15 Tennessee team? So start to figure more of this out as we go along. But no, Dabo was not on the hot seat when you called in and told me that during the offseason. And after losing to the number 1 team on the planet, he's still not on the hot seat. Brian Kelly. This one surprised me. Now, this is only his 3rd year at LSU. And you got to remember, his first year at LSU, he won the SEC West. Lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game, but a pretty good first season by any measurement, right? To take a team to the conference championship game in year 1, not bad. Year 2, not quite as good as year 1. They did win 9 or 10 games, though. In year 2, came up just short of the SEC title game and had a Heisman-winning quarterback. So the hot seat talk about Brian Kelly in the offseason was 100% ridiculous to me, made no sense at all, and really I just laughed it off the air when people would call in and mention it. Now we're in year 3 and he's lost his first game to Southern Cal, and some of this is starting to come back up. I do not think Brian Kelly is on the hot seat for losing to Southern Cal in week 1. They talk about it being his 3rd straight opening season loss. That is a little alarming. 8 months to prepare for a game. Not that you should win every one. You got to remember they've been playing good competition. They played Florida State each of the last 2 years, both losses for LSU, and then Southern Cal to kick off this season. So it's not like they're playing Chattanooga. You know what I'm saying? And you also have to remember that before Brian Kelly got there, LSU lost their 2 opening season games before that. So they've lost 5 opening season games in a row. Not ideal, not good. I don't think they're making the SEC championship game this year. I don't think they're making the playoffs. But it's not because they lost to Southern Cal. I didn't think they were making the playoffs before they lost to Southern Cal. In fact, I predicted them to lose to Southern Cal. So it wasn't really anything unexpected to me. But no, I do not think Brian Kelly's on the hot seat. I do not think he will be on the hot seat. And I definitely don't think he will be fired anytime this season or after this season. Billy Napier, this is the obvious one. Everyone agreed during the offseason, yes, Billy Napier is on the hot seat. This is a huge year for him. Yes, the schedule is brutal. People were talking about, well, if he gets to 7 or 8 wins, he should be coach of the year. He might not get 3 wins, my guy. Obliterated by Miami in week 1. I don't know anybody left on planet Earth who is still supporting Billy Napier as head coach outside of trolling. Like I put a post up on Twitter yesterday or the day before, a picture of Billy Napier that said, please support this man. He just needs 3, 4, maybe 5 more years. He'll get it turned around eventually. We love you, Billy. Everyone needs to support this guy. Like, obvious troll. Yeah, I want Florida to keep Billy Napier forever. But there's not a reasonable human being left on planet Earth who thinks Billy Napier will survive the season. So yeah, that one, it can't get no hotter, really. Mike Norvell. They called in over the summer and wanted Mike Norvell on the hot seat because of the way Florida State handled the playoff snub in the Orange Bowl and different things like that. And I thought that was silly. And now here we are into the season and he's 0-2. What does that say about Mike Norvell? Well, I think it says a lot. I think it says that maybe what he's doing is not really working. We're relying too heavily on the portal, and it's a feast or famine type deal. So, yeah, you got Jordan Travis, who's a generational talent at quarterback, and then you bring in a Keon Coleman, a Jared Verse, a Jaheim Bell, and you sort of hit on a lot of different areas, and you have a pop year last year. Those guys are gone, and then we see what we're left with as a product on the field this season by Florida State. It's absolutely terrible and horrific. And I do think Mike Norvell deserves the overwhelming amount of the blame. He's been there 5 years. This isn't a year 1 or a year 2 thing where he's still dealing with some previous coaching staff's leftovers. Everything in, around, and about Florida State football right now is 100% the responsibility of Mike Norvell. He's brought every single coach in. He's brought every single player in, recruit, high school, portal, all that stuff. It's all on Norvell. And this year is an absolute disaster, and it's going to continue to be. The problems that are occurring at Florida State right now in terms of their on-field play are not something that can be fixed during the course of the season. So they're just going to continue to be really, really bad this year. That being said, I don't think he's getting fired. I just don't. I don't even really think he's on the hot seat. I think, let's say he ends up winning 4 or 5 games this year. I think next year becomes an important year for him. I think next year he can't do that 2 years in a row. If he does it this year, then next offseason we can have this conversation about should Norvell be on the hot seat entering 2025. If 2024 goes the way it looks like it's going, a 4 or 5 win season, something like that. But I don't think he's on the hot seat right now or getting fired this year. Ryan Day, I've disagreed with this every single time anyone has ever brought it up to me. I still disagree with it. Ryan Day is not on the hot seat. He's got the highest winning percentage of any active coach in the country. He wins over 90% of his games. I know you hate it that he's lost to Michigan 3 years in a row and hadn't won a national title. I know that drives you up the wall. No coach in the history of mankind has been fired for not winning a national title. Never happened. Nobody has ever made the national title game and been fired immediately afterwards for losing it. And Ryan Day won't be the first. No Ohio State coach has ever been fired for not beating Michigan. Now, y'all try to argue with me about that? Oh, yeah, this guy was fired because he couldn't beat Michigan. Look, if a coach is losing 5 or 6 games a year and one of those losses happens to be to Michigan, he's not getting fired because he lost to Michigan. He's getting fired because he's a 500 coach and he's losing 5 or 6 games a year. Ohio State has never fired an 11-1 coach because they lost to Michigan. Never. And they're not going to do it now. On top of that, they're way better than Michigan this year. Have you seen Michigan? They play. We'll see. Michigan plays Texas. But Ohio State looks pretty good this year. Ryan Day is not on the hot seat. Ryan Day is not getting fired. Just forget it. It's a wet dream that you're having. James Franklin. This one is legitimate. First of all, James Franklin is not getting fired this year. Period. James Franklin is in a situation where if he doesn't take advantage of this year, he could find himself on the hot seat next year. And what I mean is the Big Ten has gone away from divisions, which means He's no longer stuck in the Big Ten East behind Michigan and Ohio State. Penn State's been a pretty good team, a top 15 program under James Franklin. The problem has been he finishes behind Ohio State and Michigan almost every single year, which is third in his division. It means he never makes the Big Ten title game, rarely made the New Year's Six. A couple of times he did, never made the playoffs. Well, now the divisions are gone. He no longer plays both Ohio State and Michigan. He only plays Ohio State this year, and he gets them at home. His second most difficult game might be on the road at Southern Cal, and that looks winnable. I mean, it won't be easy, but that's a winnable game. And we have a 12-team playoff. Over the last 6 or 7 years, Penn State would have made a 12-team playoff over half the time. They finished in the top 12 over half the time. So, yes, I guess if James Franklin goes 7-5, 8-4, even 9-3, and misses the playoffs this year, then I think next year becomes a win or else you're going on the hot seat year. But I don't think he's getting fired this year. For one thing, I don't think he's going to have a record that would warrant it. I think they looked pretty good against West Virginia in week 1 with 34-12 or something. Drew Aller looked good. They don't look now, but they might have found some wide receivers. And you know they got one of the best defenses in the country again. Nick Singleton at running back is elite. It looks like they could win a lot of games and potentially crack a top 12 playoff. Not sure they can win the Big Ten, but to get in the playoffs now, they don't have to. So we'll see. But no, I don't think James Franklin's on the hot seat this year. The furthest I'd be willing to go would be if he only wins 8 or 9 games this year and misses the playoffs, then next year becomes you better make the playoffs or you will be on the hot seat type of deal with him. Sam Pittman, 100% on the hot seat. I know they won 122-0 this past weekend against nobody, which according to Tennessee and Auburn fans makes them a playoff team because Tennessee and Auburn also won 120-something to -2, and that proves that both those teams are going undefeated, according to them. But back here in reality, back here in the real world where our feet actually touch the ground, we realize 2 things. Arkansas is not very good, and they got a difficult schedule. They're likely to lose a lot of games this year. On top of that, they brought in Petrino to be the offensive coordinator. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Arkansas field a pretty good offense this year, but have a pretty bad record anyway. And the powers that be at Arkansas looking around and going, you know what? Let's give Petrino another try, and sort of ushering Pittman out the door and promoting Bobby Petrino to head coach. I think it seems like a clear path has already been cut to sort of make that happen if Arkansas has a difficult year. So I agree with Sam Pittman here being on the hot seat. Shane Beamer, this is one I had a hard time with in the offseason because there's no denying last year did not go good for South Carolina. However, last year was his 3rd year. His first 2 years, he overachieved and exceeded expectations in each of his first 2 years. So appeared to be heading in the right direction year 1 and year 2, had a downturn in year 3, and so then you're looking to year 4 and you're going, okay, is year 4 going to be more like year 1 and year 2? Or are we getting ready to continue this downward trend, which will be a bad sign both for South Carolina and Shane Beamer's future employment possibilities in Columbia, South Carolina? Well, although the results are not fully in, week 1 did not go well for our boy Shane Beamer in South Carolina. They did get a win, but it was a struggle win to the nth degree against something called Old Dominion, and they looked horrible. They looked really bad, and this week they got to play Kentucky, and I believe it's on the road in Kentucky. They're probably going to lose. So, 1-1, hard to say how it's going to turn out for them over the course of the year. I find it hard to believe that South Carolina would fire Beamer after this year. Even if they go, 4-8 or 5-7, I just find it hard to, a lot of this is about expectations, realistic expectations. I'm not talking about fan expectations. I mean, a lot of this is about school expectations, okay? And I'm not here, the point of this video is not to shit on South Carolina or their fans. But who would South Carolina bring in that is magically turning them into a 10 or 11 team program? Nobody, really. Probably nobody. Now, I'm not saying that means they should stick with Shane Beamer no matter what if the guy wins 3 games a year from now to the end of time. But I just don't know if South Carolina is one of these schools that should be turning coaches over every 3. I'll give you an example. Florida. It's never ideal to turn your coach over every 3 years. It's very hard to get any footing that way and sustain yourself for any long-term success. But at a place like Florida, what Billy Napier is doing there is just so unacceptable based on what we all know Florida's capable of doing. So you go, I know he's only been there 3 years, but God, you got to get rid of this. You got to get somebody else in there because that's unacceptable what's happening there. You look at South Carolina and you go, yeah, it sucks. Shane Beamer's only averaging 7 wins a year there. But isn't South Carolina as a school only averaging 5 wins a year over the course of their existence? So Beamer's in the upper echelon, upper half of what South Carolina coaches have done over the years. I don't know. It's a tough spot. And I like Shane Beamer, just to be honest with you. I'm not saying I think he's a good head coach. I just like him. But so he's a little too clownish for me. I enjoy his sort of comedy routines that he does when they're winning. But when he comes into these post-game press conferences after losses and tries to put on his clown shoes and make everybody laugh with a never-ending handkerchief trick, that shit's not funny after a loss, Shane. It's not. And they look bad. It could get bad for them this year. I don't think he will be fired this year, though. But that's the one that I'm not very, I'm not sure on. Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, man. It looked like a bad hire a couple of years into the Brent Pry experiment at Virginia Tech. And then the second half of last season happened. And the second half of last season may end up being the worst thing that ever happened to Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. What do I mean by that? It raised expectations at Virginia Tech, and it's possible it raised expectations to an unachievable level. There's a lot that goes into why a team might look better this one half of the season versus the other. Scheduling, who do you play, when do you play them, where do you play them, injuries, both on your team and the teams that you're playing late in the year. Are they without key players? So, in other words, you beat a team in November that had you played them in September, they'd have beat you by 40 maybe. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. But Virginia Tech did look good the last half of the season last year, and then they had basically 95% of their production returning from last year, 21 starters returning. And so they became sort of like the dark horse sort of pick for a lot of people to maybe make some noise in the ACC or even sneak into a playoff type situation. And then they came out in week 1 and lost to Vandy. And look, shout out to Vandy. That's a big win for Vandy. Not necessarily because it's against Virginia Tech, but because it's against a Power 5 team. Vandy just doesn't beat very many Power 5 teams. Just look at their record. Outside of them having James Franklin for a handful of years, a decade ago, they struggle to get to 4 or 5 wins a year, never mind bowl eligibility. And for all the hype Virginia Tech had, to show up and lay an egg there against Vandy was a really, really bad look for Brent Pry. Now, no one's ever been fired for losing game 1. We'll see what Virginia Tech does the rest of the season. But that was a bad look for Virginia Tech. Dave Aranda at Baylor. This is one I got to eat some crow on because I might have been wrong. I really liked Dave Aranda, and I thought he was going to make a great head coach, and I thought he would have success at Baylor. And so far, at least, nothing has been further from the truth. It appears as though he may not know what he's doing. We'll find out this year. I think this is a make-or-break year for Dave Aranda. Again, with Baylor, I would be surprised if they fired Dave Aranda this season. But if this is another bad season, then I think next year becomes the must-win season for Dave Aranda. I was very high on him as a coordinator moving into the head coaching space, and it has not worked. It has not worked. We'll see what they do this year. They play Utah, I believe, this week. They're a 14.5-point underdog, Baylor is. So we'll see if they can pull off an upset. And these two, I guess we can cross off the list already. Mario Cristobal and Lincoln Riley. I disagreed with both of these. I disagreed with both of these when I was told this in the offseason by people that would call in or whatever. Yes, Cristobal blew some games last year with some questionable coaching. But the talent that he was accumulating down there was so impressive to me, it overwhelmed that. I put faith. I might not have faith in Cristobal's ability to coach at an A++ level on Saturdays for 3 hours when the game is being played. But I trust Mario Cristobal's ability to gather so much talent down there that it's going to overcome a handful of his bad decisions. And after week 1, I have to say Miami looks like the real deal. And I'm not just talking about Cam Ward. Obviously, he played a great game, and that's the easiest thing to spot or notice when you take a look at that game against Florida. But if you really watch the game, they absolutely dominated on the lines of scrimmage, both sides of the ball. They've got a legitimate line of scrimmage. People talk a lot of times about one of the differences between the elite teams in the SEC and the Big Ten versus maybe some of the teams in the other leagues is the line of scrimmage play at the top in the SEC and the Big Ten. When you look at Miami's offensive and defensive lines and then you watch them play, they look like those elite teams that people talk about along the lines of scrimmage. That's what they look like. And they've got Cam Ward and some crazy playmakers like Restrepo and a really good defense to go along with it in a very weak ACC. If you ask me right now, who would you pick to make the playoffs out of the ACC? And your choices are either Miami or anyone else, I would take Miami. I think they're that much of a favorite right now to win the ACC. So, no, you can cross this crystal ball off the list. And the next one was Lincoln Riley. They're paying him $12, $13 million a year out there. I've always thought Lincoln Riley is a quit before you fire me type of person. I can't imagine a scenario where Lincoln Riley ever gets fired. I have thought for years that he is eventually headed to the NFL. I don't think he'll be in the college world forever. I think he's headed to the NFL at some point. Comes out in week 1, gets a nice win over LSU at a neutral site game in Vegas. We'll see how they look now as they transition into Big Ten play over the next couple of months here. I don't expect Southern Cal to be competing for or winning the Big Ten this year, and I don't expect them to be making the playoffs. Are they a good team? Probably. They're probably a good team. Are they a playoff caliber team? I don't think so. But I don't think he's on the hot seat. I don't think he's getting fired. And in fact, I don't think he will ever get fired. I think eventually he is darting for the NFL. I think eventually he's headed for the NFL. So there you go. There's some coaches I heard about all offseason from you guys, whether it be in the comment section, the call-in shows, whatever the case. About, hey, Lou, what about this coach on the hot seat, that coach on the hot seat? I wrote the list down sort of over the course of the season. Actually, I forgot. I was looking for something else in my copious notebook today, and I came across that list of coaches, so I decided now would be a good time to make that video about it. But let me know down below. Forget the whole hot seat talk. Let me know down below, what coaches do you think are getting fired this year, either during the season or immediately after. Therefore, their teams will have a new coach next year. I'm not worried about a list of 100 names of coaches who might be on the hot seat. I want to know your actual predictions. What coaches are getting fired either during the season or immediately after the season this year? Therefore, their teams will have a new coach next year. Let me know down below. As usual, I appreciate you watching. Make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll talk to you again soon. Have a good morning.